I'm Johansson. I am the one without a name tag. Because I didn't make it over to register yet. But I'm supposed to be here, I promise. And I'm an author. I write thriller, sci-fi, thriller, paranormal, that kind of thing. And I will follow Overwatch a lot and a little bit of League of Legends.
My name is Dan Wells. I write science fiction and horror. The most recent is called Zero G. It's an audio-only full-cast drama that's basically Home Alone in space. It's on Audible. Listen to it with Brad. The most pertinent to this panel is the Murdock series, which is a 3-book cyberpunk trilogy about esports and an esports team. In which, let's get this out of the way up front, my game is called Overworld, and the main character is a Latina with one arm who's a hacker. And that came out a full year before Sombra was even life. So I choose to believe they ripped me off. I have no proof of that. But
so much so I tweeted him about it and was like, you realize, like, they're the same person, right?
I also am Sombra main. Oh, I didn't say. I am way into Overwatch. That is my absolute main one. It is the first esport I've ever considered actually getting into the competitive scene rather than just watching it. But I got into esports through League of Legends. I lived in Germany at the time, so all my fandoms were like Fnatic and Lemon Dogs and all the European teams. So.
Rest in peace, Lemon Dogs. I like your shirt, man.
Alright, my name's Natalie Murdock. I'm a freelance writer. I mostly specialize in RPGs and collectible card games, so I have a lot of freelance work that
No, you're good.
I do for Fantasy Flight games and that type of thing. So my specialty when it comes to this topic is actually in the college administration league games for esports. So I was the staff administrator for the BYU Hawaii Gamers Club chapter of TESPA, and we ran that and did events coordinating and administration for that. So that's kind of my background. And the fandom that I follow is mostly StarCraft and occasionally Hearthstone when I'm mad at StarCraft, which happens a lot.
Awesome. Well, I'm Natalie Whipple. I am also a writer. I have also written a cyberpunk virtual reality trilogy called The Vengeance
Super
Code.
good.
Only the first one's out. It would have been all of them if I didn't have a baby last year. So, oh well. And I also most recently have written some Fortnite books. So yes, I am the mom who knows about Fortnite. I freak out a lot of 11-year-old boys. Let me tell you, there are 6 in that one. The last one is coming out in March. So yeah, I'm super into League of Legends. That's the one I probably know the most about. And then obviously Fortnite. I know a lot about Fortnite and their experimental esports adventures this last year in particular. And man, right now I'm a big fan of the brand new Apex Legends that just came out and is kind of taking...
I am so bad at Apex Legends.
It is shockingly fun to watch, which really surprised me, and a lot of Twitch streamers are really enjoying playing it. And so it has been exciting. And not only that, but it's like freaking diverse, like the characters that you get to play. So, I mean, I'm on the Apex Legends board already.
They did a good job with that one.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we're gonna just let things happen naturally, and I do have questions as well. Should we need them? But let's start off with some of those seed questions. So why do people enjoy watching competitive video games? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I think that that's kind of a false question to ask, and not that that's your fault because everybody asks it.
Yes.
And people will say, "Well, why would you watch a game instead of just playing a game?" And I'm like,
Why are
"You watch football,
Why not
right?
play it?
Like every sport that we watch is a thing you could do yourself, but you don't, and you watch somebody else do it. And you might do it recreationally yourself, but not at the pro level. And the more you know about football or basketball or whatever, the more you enjoy watching really good people be really good at it. Video games is the same way, and I think it's the future, and I think that we are one generation at most away from that being a ridiculous question that no one will ask anymore.
Something that I really enjoyed as a kid when my dad was watching, obviously, like Michael Jordan play on the Chicago Bulls, was just the athleticism of the players. And I think that that's something that I really enjoy in the esports scene, is knowing how the game works, knowing what it takes to actually accomplish the things that they're doing, knowing the strategy that's involved, and realizing that these people are like at the top of the talent of those skills available to them. And so, and not just that, but also kind of just like following the drama of each of the players, you know, knowing like what kind of backgrounds, what kind of builds they like, what kind of strategies they employ, really just kind of helps me to really appreciate just how much time and talent goes into their performance every single game, which is just so fun for me to watch, because I'm like, there's always surprises, you know, you can know stats, you can know players, you can know what they're used to doing, but I love when they just kind of like, I don't know, build their wings on the way down after they've fallen off of a cliff, you know? Like, it's really fun just to see what they're capable of when put in a pinch and that type of thing. So it's just kind of just fun to see what they're capable of.
Yeah.
I could never do it. It's that human story. Like, I mean, you know, they always do, like, up closes on, like, athletes and singers and all that. And the same thing happens in pro esports. Like, I mean, you learn about Faker and like people who are just so good, but like also knowing their background and learning their personalities and like all that kind of stuff. Like, you really start rooting for people, just like people have their favorite quarterback or their favorite sports team. I don't know. That's all I got. I got quarterback. So, you know, I love those stories and I love getting behind those people, and that's what really drew me to like adapt League of Legends stuff into Vengeance Code, because I was just so into their stories and I wanted to write about pro gamers on that kind of level, because it just really grabbed me. But why I think it's interesting, I mean, we all have those games that we're good at and those games that we're bad at. For me growing up, it was Zelda. I loved watching my brother play Zelda because I loved the story, and he was good at Zelda, and I was terrible at it. And so I would watch him, because every time I play Zelda, I just kind of like rage quit about 30 minutes in, because I can't do anything and I always die. I really like RPGs, and I'm happy to play those into forever, and MMOs. And I think these games are games that can induce rage when you're not very good at them. And so I personally find it a more enjoyable experience to watch people play League or Overwatch or these really like high skill games that I would just be like rage quitting over every single time. So yeah, that's kind of why.
You know, Marty made a really good point about, you know, the more you know about the game, the more you appreciate it. And again, you can see that with real sports. America is not really a soccer place. It's slowly catching on.
Or rugby.
But,
No rugby.
you know, I can sit down with somebody who doesn't watch soccer and narrate the match for them, and by, you know, the end of the first quarter, they understand the strategy. They understand why it's just 20 solid minutes of passing, in why we never shoot at the goal and all these things. And once you understand it, you like it. And so, you know, again, with Overwatch, I sat down with, that's how I got one of my kids into it, was I sat down with her and I'm like, okay, watch. Okay, their abilities are on cooldowns. You can tell that this guy's counting the cooldowns. He's counting the other player's cooldowns in his head while he plays. That's amazing. And she's like, oh, okay, now why are they not engaging now? Well, because they know the other team has ults. And so, like, you start understanding how the game is played and why they're playing, and then it gets 10 times more interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think like these guys said, it's watching anyone who is really skilled can make almost anything fascinating. And it only amplifies it when you are someone who really appreciates and enjoys the game yourself. Yeah.
Awesome. So what direction are esports heading as a scene and as an industry?
I think Dan already said this, like, in a way. I think we're going to be the last people that are really asked. I mean, not like today is going to be the last time, but we're going to be the last like generation, I guess, that really is being asked, like, why is that a thing? Mm-hmm. I think it's definitely growing. It's definitely going to continue to expand and gain popularity. I mean, Overwatch was I know the finals were on ESPN. Where was the World Cup as well? I feel like it was.
I think it was.
I think it was too.
I don't have cable.
All right. I think it was. So anyway, it's just growing and growing in audience. And I mean, I personally am a person, like I always liked Nintendo and stuff. And we have actually a game in my family that we have played as a family since I was tiny. And it's called Dr. Mario. Is anyone familiar?
Oh,
with
yeah.
that game? I am like epic goddess level of Dr. Mario. And like no one in my family can beat me. And every time we get together, my mom tries to. But that was basically the extent of my gaming until Overwatch, and League of Legends. When my kids and my husband were like, but like Overwatch made me sick at first because I was not used to watching first-person shooter, and I had to like adjust to it and stuff. But now I'm just obsessed. Just can't handle it. So I am not a person who would typically be a huge esports fan, but I am, and I think that's just going to continue and snowball as more and more people are exposed to it.
Overwatch is a good one to bring up for the future of esports because Blizzard and now Activision have sunk so much money into their big giant gambit. We're going to mainstream this by hook or by crook, by sheer force of will. We are going to drag this into the mainstream. And there's a good argument to be made that Blizzard as a company is kind of imploding under the sheer force of trying to make Overwatch and esports a mainstream thing.
I was going to bring that up because Heroes of the Storm just took the hit for Overwatch. Their league is gone. And I think this is the first time that like a big company like Blizzard has announced that they're just discontinuing the Pro League for Heroes of the Storm.
And I remember being on this same panel with Natalie last year and talking about how, the Overwatch League was brand new and a rising tide lifts all ships and this is going to help. And I think 1 year into it, we're seeing some casualties. We're seeing, Heroes of the Storm fell on the wayside and it's not going to be as easy as we had hoped it would be. Yeah. But it is helping and it is raising the visibility and the fact that, there are university programs where people go to college to play a video game. That it's becoming a bigger thing. Well,
and I think the tragedy and the inevitability with Heroes of the Storm for a long time, because League of Legends was like the huge one that kind of made a breakout in America, people were trying to make MOBAs. Like, there were a million MOBAs. And I feel like we're starting to see this like change in esports where there's really going to be like a standout or maybe two standouts in a genre. So like Overwatch is that FPS like first person shooter, like, and it just stands out because it's got their unique characters. It's much easier to watch than, might offend people, than like CSGO or Halo, where like everybody looks the same, and for a person who's never watched it, it's very hard to follow. Where, I mean, Overwatch, you see a character, you're like, oh, I know that character, I know that one, I know that one. It makes it much easier to watch. So it's standing out in the FPS genre. And Dota 2 and League of Legends have really cornered MOBA. Like, Heroes of the Storm had no chance against those monoliths already because they were trying to pull MOBA viewers from two highly established pro leagues already. So there's just, I think people are realizing you're not going to break the MOBA leagues right now. It's over. And now FPS, it's kind of in competition. The Battle Royale system is in huge flux right now. People are trying desperately to figure out how to turn Fortnite into a pro league. And it's incredibly problematic. And most Battle Royales have been having a big struggle with this because of the quantity of players. You can't always have 100 players on stage. That's a lot of computers. That's a lot of technical support. I mean, it's a big undertaking. Not only that, I don't know if you guys are into Fortnite or not, but Pro Fortnite has this problem where it's incredibly boring. Like, normal Fortnite and watching it, like Twitch streamers, they can be really funny and they make it entertaining and like the unpredictability is great. But actual pro Fortnite is like a bunch of people boxing up and like sitting in their little turtle shells until the end circle, and then they all like get a heal off, and whoever has the most heals is the person who wins the game, and it's like the worst. So they've been trying so hard to figure out how to convince players not to do that, and it's not working very well. So I'm really interested to see if anyone is able to establish
that brings
pro battle
a
royale.
really interesting point, I think, just about games and their meta, because right now esports is a relatively new thing, right? Yeah. And so because it's relatively new, a lot of people are trying to kind of guess the market, especially when they're trying to make investments into teams, leagues, tournaments of any kind. Yeah. But that's really hard to do because I feel like the meta can definitely change how the game is played, and then that may sink the game. If it's boring for audience.
I felt like League of Legends really struggled last year because their meta was terrible. It was terrible. Yeah. And a lot of people stopped watching.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it's fascinating too. Overwatch, when they actually started building it, like they built it with the intention of, like, the entire time the design was to be the breakout esports game. They built it in a way that it mimics like football games, where it's broken into quarters and there's time for commercial breaks, and it's like literally modeled after successful real life sports. And so I think that was brilliant, like, honestly, and it does make it so interesting to watch, and it can swing so far from direction to direction, from map to map. It's just it makes it very entertaining because they designed it to be that way, which was very smart.
Yeah. So what I was going to say, though, about Overwatch League and the meta is everyone is just dying to see what happens with GOATs as Overwatch League Season 2 starts, because there's really only one comp that wins all the time, and is it just going to be a whole season of GOATs? I think inevitably we will end up with a ban system the way League of Legends does, and I am very surprised that Blizzard has been so reticent to get into it. But, everyone's crossing their fingers and saying, okay, these teams have been practicing. Today's the big day. Spitfire or whoever it is going to break out. Honestly, probably Philadelphia Fusion is going to be the one that has the weird, crazy strategy that nobody saw coming. And we hope that that's going to happen, but it might just be a whole season of GOATs, and the meta could really hurt it.
And to their credit, like, I do think they're trying hard to nerf GOATs, like, in a really serious way.
They're really going all in on nerfing GOATs, and they still haven't killed it. They've almost neutered a couple of characters completely, and the comp is still around.
Yeah, and that is like that's a big thing that a lot of, I'm scared because I played World of Warcraft. I know how hard and difficult it is to balance things, and Blizzard never seems to quite get it right on the balance. Like, it's very, like, I don't know who's on their team, but like, there's just always something that's very obviously not balanced, and everybody kind of gravitates toward it every time. League has had some success and then some not success, and it does impact the season quite a bit.
It does, and that's why I think a ban system could be so valuable, because it allows the tournament to balance itself. Yeah. Jane, who's a streamer coach guy, and he's one of the Dallas Fuel coaches, he ran his own little tournament a few weeks ago in which he's like, as an experiment, we're going to allow banning. And it was so cool. I think as a test case of is banning going to work, yes, it worked really well, and you should start it.
A lot of people argue that the banning is the boring part, like in League of Legends, because they spend all this time talking about bans and picks right before. And I actually really enjoy that part.
Oh, yeah.
It's the strategy part. And I'm obviously like pro bans, because obviously the meta's never going to be perfect. Like, the developers aren't ever going to be able to get that kind of perfect balance where nothing's going to be like the standout OP character. And they actually added more bans in League of Legends. They used to have 3, now they have 5 per side. And like 3 of them at the beginning, and then like 2 right in the middle of picks. So, and that's added.
That's so cool.
Its own.
Love it.
I think the main
12
argument that
bans in Dota.
Really?
But there's 100.
They have a ton of characters.
3 characters.
Oh. The main argument that I've heard against instituting banning in Overwatch is that the entire premise behind it is to be a free pick system where you can change at any given time. But I don't think that really changes if you have like one ban per team, like you can still change, you can still pick anybody. If you're banning 6 people, that definitely makes a difference when you have a smaller hero pool. Yeah. But like one person, if you're just banning Brigitte across the board every time, and not to name names or anything.
Yeah. The thing that blew my mind about Jane's tournament when he ran it is that the number 1 banned character was Sombra.
Really?
And she was not even considered going into it to be a huge threat. But people kept banning her because she's the one that would shut down whatever thing you were trying to do yourself.
Was it Fitzy here playing? Because I would ban Sombra if he was playing.
Ban him right out of it.
I think it's fascinating. I think it could work fine with the ban system, but I think that I kind of understand the idea, this ideal that you can make everything balanced, but they should know by now that you can't.
Yeah.
And Blizzard should really know that by now.
Yeah, Blizzard should be well aware. Even if you have just 1 ban per team, what that allows you to do is create your own meta, right? And so you can still flip back and forth between characters, you can still do anything, but this is going to be a game with no Brig and no Widow, and that's going to change how everyone builds their comps.
Yeah, I think one thing too, I think that on the counter argument, being able to ban would balance things out, but it also, like, because of the way the meta changes, because of the different things they're doing to the characters, like from stage to stage, Overwatch League is vastly different, like because they implement a new,
they'll add a new map, or they'll add a new person.
They'll add a new person, and watching that change is really fascinating, and I think that having the banning system would level that out, which is good, and it may make it somewhat less interesting. That's a risk, I think, that you take.
And I think that's something that actually has happened with the Hearthstone game, is that they've come out with just so many changes to the game over just such a short period of time that it's kind of the same experience every single time you watch a game. And it's not really fun anymore. I think that's why Hearthstone is starting to lose. I mean, it's been losing players for a little while now, but I think it's just because they are, like, the company itself is trying to almost micromanage the gameplay a little bit, and so it's just become more of the same decision as a company every single time. And so there is a risk in a company kind of stepping in and saying, well, we actually want gameplay to look this way, because then it does kind of force all of the players into a corner that does get a little boring. And you have to have audience interest in order for esports to work, because that's where the money comes in, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And what's interesting, though, is that a lot of times these balances come because people who play the game are complaining.
Yep.
And I mean, as a creator, I find this really interesting that, like, sometimes people think they know best and they know what they want, and, like, if people pay too much attention to their audience, they can break their game as well. Like, like sometimes players, like, oh, they hate this one thing, but, like, sometimes that one thing is incredibly important to that game being interesting. Like, I mean, you can't take building out of Fortnite. Like, there's a lot of people who are like, oh, if we just have no building in this game, it'd be great. I'm like,
then it would just be PUBG.
It would be something else, and it might be a great game in that way, but it wouldn't be Fortnite. And so, you gotta have I think creators also need to stick to their guns and not worry too much about what the player base is saying, because sometimes, a lot of the times they're not right. They're just whiners who got stomped in their last game.
Yeah. I think that a lot of it, you can learn a lot of lessons from the way that the various CCG tournaments have handled it. Collectible card games like Magic. There was a company called Decipher that had a bunch of really big games, including Star Wars, which was their big one, and Lord of the Rings. And they had kind of an across-the-board policy that cards were never retired and never banned. And what that meant in practice is that by the time you got 5 or 6 sets into the game, every card was designed to specifically counter a pre-existing card. And it was a very weird system that was almost impossible to get into as a newbie. Magic, on the other hand, their system, for the most part, they don't listen to their players. They don't let whiners guide things. And their one guiding strategy is there one deck that beats everything? Then we're going to ban whatever card is enabling that deck. Their goal is to make as many viable decks as possible. And I think that's where something like Fortnite or League of Legends needs to go, is, just we want lots of different comps rather than killing the one unfun character that people don't like.
So with esports, so with colleges offering scholarships and whatnot for esports, how is this going to impact the industry?
I mean, hopefully in America at least it will gain some more legitimacy. It's kind of weird because esports is really worldwide. Like, I don't think a lot of Americans even understand how massive it is in China or Korea or some of these other places. I mean, they have stadiums built specifically for viewing esports in China. Like, it's huge. And there's no need for them to continue to legitimize things in China. I mean, their players are the highest paid. They have houses. They do get stuff. I mean, it's a nice setup in China. And here, I think it helps legitimize it. I think we're still in that process where people are just like, oh, it's not a real thing, sort of thing. And I don't know if it will always be necessary because a lot of players get recruited at like 17, the really good ones. But I think for right now it's really important just for people to have that experience and see that like it's a real thing and it's serious.
I think it's really helpful in that, like you were saying, like players are oftentimes recruited very young because their career starts young and burns out really fast.
Yes.
Right? And so we have had cases where students, high school students will drop out of high school in order to commit their lives to this new career path that will burn out
or may not
give them
happen.
8 to 10 years at the most.
Exactly. And so I think that the nice thing about including a collegiate, I guess, system for facilitating these players is really helpful because it does give them a career path. One thing that I really loved about TESPA while I was involved with it was that it was also kind of like a professional career, I guess, like guidance system where it was telling you not just like, hey, you can come play games at this club, but it was also like, hey, we could also offer you opportunities in leadership in coming up with and organizing game tournaments, getting expertise and training on how to run some type of tournament. And then, of course, like opening your eyes to other career paths that were available to you in the esports industry or other computer science industries.
And that is massive because, like, some of them started retiring really early on. Yeah, a lot of them are realizing they can actually have a longer career than they thought now, which is great because there have been some league players who have been 7-8 years now, which is really long in esports. And some who have come back too. They're like, oh, I'm quitting, and then they're like, oh, never mind, that was actually a pretty good job. I think I'll come back. I don't know what else to do with my life. So it is. They do need a lot of guidance because they are young. Like they haven't had any financial training. They haven't had anything like that. So it does provide really good opportunities there.
Yeah.
I think the bigger problem with longevity for esports is like. We keep comparing it to normal sports. Football. There isn't a company that owns football, right?
Yeah.
And yet, there's a company that owns League, and there's a company that owns Overwatch, and like all of these are, the barrier to entry is higher. You can't just go play street hockey with your friends in the same way that you can go play Counter-Strike with your friends, right? So there's like not to get political, but there's a class barrier for a lot of esports because you need to have not only a computer but a really nice computer if you want to compete professionally. And then there's the idea that is something like Overwatch going to be around forever? Is it going to stay fresh long enough? When we are promoting Overwatch, we are also inherently promoting Blizzard and Activision as well. And are people cool with that? That is a problem that normal sports doesn't have, that esports will inevitably have to deal with.
I mean, I think that's true. I think that there's also some similar problems because mean, like the NFL.
Yeah. Good point.
As a whole, I mean, they've handled a lot of things pretty poorly for several years, and so. But if you're a fan of a team, you know, you're still kind of in on that team. But even if you don't like the NFL and what they're doing, so there's still some of that complication. But I think it takes it to a new level with esports. And as far as the legitimacy thing goes, just for an example, I have two sons that are on an Overwatch. Have you guys ever heard of Owlet? Yes, some of you can. So I have two sons that are on an Owlet team. It's basically like Overwatch League, but it's like gold and diamond kind of level players that are not like obviously grandmasters, which makes it actually kind of more interesting sometimes because sometimes they're terrible and it's so funny. But you know, they spend a lot of time. They spend a lot of practice time, and they go over VOD review and all this stuff. And my mom was like, you know, why are they spending so much time on this video game? And I was like, well, I mean, first, they enjoy it. Second, they bond over it. Third, there are scholarships available for it. And that's the thing that she was like, oh, okay, cool.
Okay then.
I mean, that's the thing that she was on board then. She was like, oh, everything makes sense now, you know? So, which, you know, one of my sons also plays football, and she has never questioned why that would be a good idea in the long term for colleges. But she definitely did with esports, so.
I would love to start an all authors team. You're like the only other author that is on PC. Because there's so many that are all on PS4.
Are they? I was wondering.
That's where they all
We're
are.
about to get judgy.
Like I could put together.
Are we gonna
Play on
go
whatever
there?
system you want. I'm not complaining about that. I'm only complaining when you're on a different one than me, so that I can't form the team I want to form. Like I could put together a team tomorrow with like me and Jen, Sean and McGuire, Wes Chu, Mur Lafferty, like all these big science fiction fantasy authors. We would be so awesome. It would be like 5 out of 6 would be support because authors almost always play support, and I don't know why that is, but
That's so funny.
Guilty.
You know, Dan brought up a really good point about the entry level. Like PCs are expensive, and it just made me think about the culture in Asia because they still have in Korea they call them PC bongs. Like there is a lower level of access to computers where they can play.
PC what?
A PC bong. Basically,
Bong?
it's like a giant cafe for computers, and
Okay,
you go
I
in and you
know.
pay for a certain amount of time, and you sit at the computer and you can play.
Sure.
So it's
okay.
an easier access point than like having to actually own a computer.
Sure. No, I figured that was what it was. I just not familiar with that.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm like, what's the American term?
internet cafe.
Yeah, cafe.
But, and we have a couple of them, but they're not
Yeah.
set up for gaming. Utah has 2 or 3 LAN party stores that nobody knows about except probably the people in this room. It's just not a big enough cultural thing yet.
Yeah.
I think that's why there are still little outlets for like mobile gaming, like Hearthstone or like Clash Royale, where there's there's like tiny
That's a
leagues
big one.
of like esports that are still accessible to people, because most people have a cell phone now. Even if they don't have a computer, then they can still have some type of outlet for playing. So I think that might be part of where esports goes in the future, is making it more mobile and more accessible that way. Because a lot of those games are free to play. Like you can make in-game purchases, but they're still relatively free to get.
You just have to get past that barrier of like the free to play being pay to play. So
my oldest got a job. Have you guys ever heard of No Pause Gaming in Provo? Some of you maybe. It's basically that, except for it's like an internet cafe, but it's not a cafe. It's just all for gaming. Like the whole place is just gaming computers.
write that down,
And they-
guys. No pause.
Yeah, and they have
Tell your
like
friends.
an extensive amount of games. Basically, the intention is come in and pay like $5 for an hour, and you can try any game that you might want to buy, and then you can go buy it. But it's really fun. They have a lot of Fortnite tournaments with prizes. And he works there, so like he checks people in. like helps them, and then like they want them to be good at gaming so that they can tell people tips on how to do things.
Yeah.
So like when he's not checking people in or helping anybody, he is supposed to be on the computer playing games, and he's getting paid
Poor
for it.
guy.
And the guy, I swear to you, he will never have a profession now. This will be what he does for the rest of his life. He's just going to work there. That's all he wants.
That's awesome.
Awesome. So this was touched on a little bit. So I'm a huge rugby fan, and the professional rugby players, they drop out in the mid-30s, and that's a long lifespan for them.
All Blacks.
I prefer
Sorry.
Team Canada because
No.
that's where I'm from, but you know.
You're
Sorry,
wrong,
my
but that's
family's
okay.
from New Zealand.
And so that makes sense.
It's a cultural
I guess.
must.
I have a New Zealand
So-
jersey and shirt, so I like them too. But so esports players, they like was mentioned, they don't have typically a long lifespan in their career. What do you think are some things that they could do to prolong that? I guess take care of their mental health and I guess everything else that tears them apart.
I think it's actually already starting. So when we first started, I mean, it was like 5 buddies who got together and started competing. They might have a coach, maybe. Now it is like full on, decked out. You have coaches, you have your sports psychologists, you have managers, you have like the entire like system like set up for you, and it really has helped the players a lot. And you're not seeing as many players go on tilt. There was a big period where like a lot of them were caving under the pressure of social media and the criticism that would just like flood in after a bad game. That's kind of going away because they're being trained on how to deal with that kind of stuff. And earlier, it was really focused on that new flashy player. But now a lot of teams are favoring experience because they are trying to open up the meta where it's not this meta, it's you can employ many metas from the past. And so those older players are actually more advantageous because they have a bigger champion pool and they know how to play in many different metas. So you're seeing more take on a longer career, like Soaz from Fnatic, who is recently not on Fnatic anymore, but he was on Fnatic for like 8 years. I think this is his 9th year playing, maybe 10th. He's one of the longest playing players. That's a decade in pro esports, which is kind of insane when you start thinking about it. But awesome at the same time. I think as long as their fingers stay okay, they'll be able to handle it.
I think also the longevity is going to increase as it becomes easier to build a life around it.
Yes.
And we don't have that societal infrastructure yet. You know, so we get these kids who are fresh out of high school or still in high school. You know, we were talking earlier, someone was talking about, I think it was you talking about Sinatra, who was too young to play in the Overwatch League last year, and everyone's so excited that he's in it this year. That's kind of what we're dealing with now, because when you're 15, you can play video games all day. When you're 25, you kind of need to do something with your life. And by the time you're 35, you probably have children or you've moved on to some other phase. And as it becomes more socially acceptable, as it becomes easier to earn a steady living, as it becomes easier to build a life that includes professional esports, I think we're going to start to see older and older people.
And actually, what's interesting is that Fortnite is kind of starting to do this with the streaming, because a lot of the streamers are making good money, and players are starting to see that these guys actually have lives. Like, Ninja has a wife, guys. I mean, that sounds so silly, but I think sometimes, like, at least my husband, he told me that he thought when he got married, he would have to give up video games forever. And so he was really scared to get married, and then he found out that I played video games and was like, video games for the rest of it. And I think there's still that mentality, right? Like, my wife won't let me play games. If I have children, I can't play games anymore. And some of these streamers are married. They have 1 or 2 children. Dr. Lupo has a kid. Tim the Tap Man has one on the way. I watch a lot of Twitch, guys. I have a 6-month-old baby. I'm just home all day and I'm watching Twitch. But like, it's cool though, because I'm happy to see these people who are having success at gaming also being able to have lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome, and I think it's bringing a lot of excitement to like the generation, like watching these people being able to balance those things.
Yeah, and I think that streamers are also like much more open about what else they're doing.
Yeah.
It's Fitzy here. He's in college. He goes to university, and he has like a set schedule that this is when I stream, and it's not kind of all over the place. It's like this is when I stream, and this is when I go to school, and like people know that he's in school right now. He's not going to be streaming, because he has other things going on,
and they
and
make
he's
time
very
and
open
they tune
about it.
in when they're on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it a lot easier to watch him.
They just flashed the 5-minute warning. Do we want to take questions?
Yeah, let's do that.
My big question is right now, the problem, especially with Overwatch, but with other games as well, is that the meta is being so focused, and the way that the game is changing is so focused on the pro scene, and the player base is suffering. What thoughts do you have on ways to fix that, things that are getting worse?
Yeah, and Overwatch is a good example of that, because there are characters like Reaper and Bastion who are absolute unforgivable murder at low levels and never appear in any top level tournament because they are considered too weak. And balancing something so that it is fun for all levels is super hard, and I don't know how you would do it. Except for, I think, frankly, what I think they need to do is they need to add a competitive system to their matchmaking software in the first place so that people can build their own tournaments and then allow whatever bans or picks or something inside of that.
League of Legends.
Exactly. League of Legends already has that in place, and it works really well, and the fact that other groups have not adopted it as quickly as they should is bizarre.
Some people still complain about it though, like, because you're always going to get the people who complain about the matchmaking system. People want that sort of matchmaking system in Fortnite though too, like, because when these games are around for long enough, you're going to have people who've been playing them for like 5 years, and the longer it's around, the harder it is for that new player to not go in and get slaughtered every time. And nobody wants to go in and get slaughtered every time. That sucks. So, I mean, they're seeing this in Fortnite too, which is why they're like trying to make it easier to not have to build. And then, the pros are like, but building. We worked really hard on that. So I think matchmaking systems do help. But I think there's also this window where a lot of pro players in League will make a Smurf account and go smash people until their rank goes up and they're in the hard levels again. So it's not perfect, because you're still going to have the good players who are tired of playing other good players and just want to go pub stuff. So it's always going to be a problem.
Sorry, I just had a thought about that. What do you think about the arcade mode in Overwatch, or the like AR Earth stuff in League of Legends, or like custom made games in
I'll let
Dota
them
scene?
deal with Overwatch.
Yeah, where it's explicitly different queue that's supposed to be more for fun as opposed to the serious competitive queues.
I'm glad that stuff's there. I almost exclusively play Quick Play and Mystery Heroes. I'm only starting to dip my toe into other things. The problem is that matchmaking becomes more difficult. There's a reason that they have one alternate play mode every other month. If they made them all available all at the same time, you would never have enough players to do a game.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I Quick Play Mystery Heroes. I like Mystery Heroes because it forces me to play things that I know that I'm terrible at. And I really think there's some kind of system that like checks that. It's like, this person's really bad at this. That's what they're going to be.
He doesn't know how to stay in the air as Farah. I'm going to give it to him 5 times in one game.
Yeah. For me, it's always Doomfist. I'm like, I don't know what it is.
No one can play Doomfist anymore.
So we had one last question.
This is a bit more of a comment, but someone was talking about how the game industries are trying to predict the market. And we also brought up Apex Legends, and I was thinking, well, Fortnite's really popular, and Overwatch's esports scene is really popular, so why not combine them into something new? Which I believe is what the Apex Legends creators thought.
Basically, that's what that is. The thing is, the real innovation is in video games right now is not really coming from companies. Like Battle Royale is the huge big thing, and that was basically a player mod that started with PUBG.
And so was MOBA.
So was MOBA with Dota. So was Counter-Strike. That was originally a Halo mod, wasn't it? That somebody was just so the new genres that come in and take everything by storm. Those are all coming from the player base. And then a company will step in and say, I'm going to combine all these and I'm going to make Apex Legends. It's going to be fantastic. They are refining what the actual innovators are coming up with.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.